So social historians have noted that European social and political thought of the 19th and early 20th century was marked by the popularity of grand theories. Influential intellectual movements such as Freud or Marx that attempted to account for a broad range of historical phenomena with a single ambitious explanation. So I love whenever the first sentence is literally 7 sentences long. And I didn't catch all that truly when I was reading it. So I stop here and I think of, and I have to go back and say, okay, so we have like this opinion of these people, right? Like it's not the author, but someone else, kind of like an LR, what we would call opinion of others. So these other people have said that the European social and political thought of these 2 centuries, and marked really strong, right, was marked by the influential of these two different theories that attempted to account for a broad range of a historical thing with a single explanation. So I'm thinking like, okay, so there's these two theories that are trying to, make a very basic explanation for this whole period.
Okay.
Freudianism, for example, views culture, politics, and other forms of social interaction as the products of specific human psychological traits that Sigmund Freud and his followers believed were universal. All right, so this gives us the definition of one of them. This is what Freud thinks. So they think that our culture was products of a specific psychological trait. Similarly, Marx sees these interactions as arising from universal economic factors. So one is psychological traits and one is economic. Such theories naturally tend towards historical determinism. Okay, the view that history develops according to universal and necessary laws. Okay, so these theories tend to view that history develops because of just like society and necessary laws. Excellent. So far, do we know what the purpose of this passage is yet?
No.
No, I don't think it's. I'm ruling out. Is there one that you think that we can rule out?
Oh, are we looking at number 22?
No, sorry, no, just in
Oh.
general, like what the purpose of the passage is. Like, is it to persuade? Is it to inform? Or is it to cost analysis?
Um, I feel like mm, I'm leaning towards inform.
Yeah, I agree. I have it narrowed. Like, I don't think it's to persuade us of anything yet. I have it narrowed down to either to inform us, or if it was cost analysis, maybe it is like Freudianism and Marxism.
Yeah, like if it's like if it's
If it,
um like if it's you mean like if it's kind of even though you use the word contrast, but like contrasting like Freud's beliefs versus like
yeah,
Marxism.
like, is he going to go the direction of saying like, oh, these are what like which one's better, and like compare the pros
Like
and cons?
Freudianism is better than Marxism
Yeah,
because of XYZ.
or this is what's good about this one. This is what's bad about this one. This is like, I don't know yet, but that's what I'm thinking.
Okay.
And so this is all based on this idea that people thought that these two grand theories influenced, or these two theories um, help explain history or whatever. All right. So now I would like you to read the next sentence of paragraph 2.
Grand theories were sometimes so influential that, in certain intellectual circles, challenging them was tantamount to denying scientific fact.
All right. So what does that mean?
I don't really know what tantamount means.
Um, what would you guess that it means in this sentence?
Challenging them was tantamount. Like essential?
Yeah. Um,
Like
I
challenging them was like, well, that doesn't really logic. I mean, challenging them was essential to denying. Saying like, yeah, I don't know.
what that word means. What do you think they're trying to say about grand theories?
That they were so powerful that um, Oh, saying that like this now to me reads that like denying these theories was like as big of a deal as denying scientific fact.
Yeah, yes, exactly. It's like the world is like, it'd be like denying that the world is round, right? Type of thing.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, and so after that sentence, what do you think the goal of this passage is? Because typically we get it from halfway, at least like 1.5 paragraphs, we should know what the goal is. So you were right. But I had said that I think it's either going to go this direction or this direction. Which direction do you think it's gone?
I still think it's gonna go to inform because
That's
it's not it at this point it's still not presenting like any sort of like contrast between Freud versus Marx.
but I agree. After this after this sentence, I'm like, okay, so it's just giving those two as examples of what grand theories are. Cool. All right. So now let's read every other sentence. So the next sentence says, in recent years, however, the authority wielded by these theories has been tarnished by the occurrence of events that do not fit them. Okay, so I'm thinking like, oh, this is like, scandalous. Like
Mhm.
there's things that have been said that tarnish these theories because they didn't actually happen. I'm like, I wonder. So if this is me being cheesy and engaging, I'm like, I wonder what didn't happen. Tell me more, please.
Okay. Um, in some cases, they have also been discredited by being linked to political systems that have been seen to fail or that have inflicted injustices on their citizens.
All right, so what does that mean?
Um, I think that that means that, um, like, maybe some people or social historians have like discredited these theories because maybe like these theories have been the foundation, like it says, kind of like for injustices or things
Mhm.
that have like like I said, like political systems that have not been successful. So like maybe that then points to people that these theories themselves are not like, I don't want to say use the word successful, but like that's like an example of maybe why these theories should not be
Yeah, they
held
failed.
to such a high regard.
Excellent. All right. It is not that works such as those of Freud and Marx, written in the 19th and early 20th century, were implausible. So, like, were in crazy explanations of things that preceded them, but that as history has progressed, they have been revealed as products of their era. And so there's, I'm like, oh, so these two theories were just products of their era, possessing inherent explanatory limitations rather than the universal truths they purported to be. Okay, so I read that. I was like, oh, I kind of start to see our author's opinion come in here. And I feel like he's saying, like, hey, it's not that they were like crazy, it's just that those two things just came from that era rather than being this universal truth. All right, so let's go on to paragraph or our last paragraph here.
I lost my place.
Oh,
Where?
sorry, line 31. It's the
Okay.
last paragraph.
Yeah.
Yep.
Despite the decline of grand theories, people have what one scholar calls a nostalgia for determinism. Do you want me to keep going
So
or
what is did we have a definition of determinism somewhere?
in the first um yeah, such theories naturally tend towards historical determinism, the view that history develops according to universal necessary laws.
Okay. And so that first part of the sentence, whenever we have despite, if this was an LR question, what would that be? That first part line there?
Like what question type?
Or what no, what part of the argument would this be? What I just highlighted in orange.
The conclusion?
Despite the decline of grand theories?
Oh. Um not a
It starts with a C.
like a
When you grant the other side.
oh a content no not contention,
Yeah, a concession, but yeah.
a concession.
Yep. So I just wanted to point that out. We're like, so when we're relating this third paragraph back to our previous one, I'm thinking, okay, so we just talked about how they're declining, and we say, despite them still declining, people have a nostalgia for wanting to believe that these are universal truths. Cool. The attraction of grand theories was the sense they conveyed that history is illogical and proceeds according to certain universal laws. In discarding these theories, we seem to have lost faith in historical determinism. So I'm saying, like, people like these because, you know, that they were just logical. People like to have things to be and make sense. Okay. And since we've discarded them, we've lost the idea and just determinism in general. Okay.
Okay. You said this leaves.
Oh, but wow.
But while we no longer believe in the deterministic explanations of history offered by grand theories, we still long for the cognitive satisfaction provided by a belief in historical inevitability. So it's saying, like, kind of, saying that, like, even though the belief is no longer held that history is deterministic, or that it kind of is being brought about by like natural or universal laws, like, people still want that, like, to be the case. So then kind of to have that like comfort of knowing that like everything that happens in history is inevitable.
Excellent. This leaves us in a curious state of intellectual discomfort. So the fact that we want that, but we can't have it, we're just, I guess, a hot mess. Cool.
But perhaps this discomfort is no bad thing, for it might finally persuade us to relinquish the vain hope for inevitability, and hence restore us to the contemplation of historical contingency, particularity, and novelty, all of which can serve as stimuli to serious thought. So the author is saying, like kind of goes back onto the point that you read, that saying even though it's may provide a state of intellectual discomfort, this discomfort might actually be a positive, because like maybe this idea of like inevitability, like, hence restore us to the contemplation, like inevitability like leads people to like not think of history in the right light.
I feel like, what is historical contingency, particularity, and novel? What I think that means is like maybe it will inevitably like lead us to just like appreciate history and think about it in a deep sense versus just like it being kind of a blanket statement.
Or like maybe instead of just thinking like, oh, like history happens the way it's going to, there's nothing we can do about it, by kind of flipping that idea and thinking about it in this different light. Like I said, it kind of,
Yeah, we actually think about it with serious, like, to serve as stimuli to serious thought. Like, we're actually going to ponder it now.
Perhaps what is needed is a historical perspective that seeks to include, as grand theories did not and could not, the particular and unrepeatable details of historical events.
So I feel like this is where I kind of feel like it is kind of turning into a persuasive essay where it's saying like, hey, maybe this is what's needed, rather than
kind of like saying like this is how we should think versus what like these like grand theories are telling us how to think.
Yeah, perhaps what is needed, rather than forcing these details into an inflexible progression, such a perspective might instead explain history by means of laws that constrain rather than necessitate. Okay, I feel like that's a really hard sentence. So rather than like forcing these details to fit what we thought or what we wanted them to be, maybe this new perspective might explain history by means of laws that could like constrain what you're able to think rather than like that they were necessary. Okay.
Well, it's kind of calling also, I feel like this is kind of maybe calling those like inevitable laws into question, saying like maybe we shouldn't just like accept things by saying that they're like inevitable, but like, because that's what I'm saying, but like explain history by means of laws that constrain.
Awesome. All right. And then what about the next sentence?
In this way, it might permit us the kind of narrative satisfaction provided by the arrangement of events in a cognate story.
Yeah. So like say like it might allow us to just, have a narrative of what happened. In short, it would allow for the possibility of historical explanations without viewing history as fully determined. So it'd be like, okay, so it allows us to like explain history without it having to fit into like a perfect box.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So once we get done with this, we ask ourselves, why did the author waste our time with this? What did they want us to know?
I actually think I feel like it's persuasion, like it's a persuade passage, because I feel like after the author kind of introduced like the idea of like grand theories and like kind of introduced like what Freud versus Marx, like kind of the theories that they held, and then kind of introduced like the idea of how influential these theories were. uh, the author ended by like providing their own kind of opinions of how these grand theories should be regarded, and how like those and how that regard like should it like can influence how we view history.
Yeah. So in simpler terms, I think what we're trying to get at is like grand theories, like we're almost wrong to think about things through the eyes of grand theories, and we suggest this other way that might be a better way to view history. Would you say that that's like a good what we're trying to get at? All
Mm-hmm.
right. So let's go ahead. So we want to predict our answers on RC as much as we can, where the first question happens to be a main point question. So we can already go into that since we already described it. So go ahead and start with A and tell me what you think.
So historians argue that grand theories, those terms. I don't like that,
Okay, why not?
because in our passage we're not really specifically comparing like looking at it through the lens of the 19th versus the 20th century.
And are they inadequate because of the complexity of the 20th century events?
No, it says it's inadequate for other reasons.
Yeah, excellent. All right, what about B?
Grand theories were too deterministic and so failed to adequately explain even the era in which they were developed. I still don't really like that one,
Okay, why not?
because like the last part, this has failed to adequately explain even the era in which they were developed. Like, I don't know, I don't really feel like the end of this passage was saying that like they like like failed in explaining like the era that they were developed. I feel like
Yes. That no, it's wrong. Like, as soon as this goes wrong, it's wrong. And we're not saying that we don't know that they failed to adequately explain the era in which they might have been fine for the era that they were developed. We don't know.
mhm.
Awesome. All right, what about C?
Those seductive in their logic and coherence, grand theories not only lead to political injustice, but also fail to account for certain universal truths. I do not like that, because at the end, like kind of their main point was honestly the opposite, and was saying that like it's not they didn't account or like fail to account for certain universal truths. It was saying that like they, by looking through the lens of history, like through this universal inevitability, they aren't like, it's like limiting our way of like looking at historical events.
Awesome. All right, what about D?
The decline of grand theories illustrates the futility of viewing history as fully determined, and the importance of recognizing the role of historical contingency. I would like to keep that one.
Okay, and let's go on to E.
Though grand theories neglected to account for universal truths, they at least provided narrative satisfaction. It did mention that, like kind of talking about how, it like included like satisfaction, but I don't feel like that was the main point.
Yeah, I feel like
So I
that's
think
so
it did.
minor. It doesn't bring in narrative satisfaction. It doesn't bring in the fact of though grand theories neglect to account for universal truths, they at least provided narrative. Like, yeah, he didn't write this just to say like, yeah, like they were terrible, but at least they did this. All right, and then what does D mean?
The decline of grand theories illustrates the futility of viewing history as fully determined and the importance of recognizing the role of historical contingency. What does it mean?
Yeah, what does that sentence mean in your own words?
Just kind of talking about how, like, kind of this idea to talk about at the end that like this idea of viewing history as like determined is like what our author was saying should no longer be the norm of kind of the way that we think about history. And again, just kind of like the author says, like it's important to kind of recognize that, you know, history, like it says, like that there's this like idea of contingency with it.
These grand theories declining has shown us how bad, like it's wrong to view history as fully determined and how we should do this instead. That's pretty much what D is saying, which is what we predicted. All right, so let's go on to 23. Which one of the following most accurately characterizes the author's attitudes towards the nostalgia for determinism mentioned in line 32? So at this point, I recommend going back and reading that sentence in the paragraph and then predicting, like before we read this, predicting what you think the author's attitude towards that is.
Despite the decline of grand theories, people have what one scholar calls the nostalgia for determinism.
So how does the author feel about this nostalgia of determinism in your own words?
Well, based upon like what we read in the passage, like I feel like the author kind of recognizes like the like some of the importance of nostalgia or like of determinism, kind of saying like, you know, that it brings people comfort. However, then I feel though that the author doesn't just have like a ton of like unwavering support for this idea of determinism, because he kind of wants history to not continue not be looking at as being like determined.
Yeah, like I feel like he understands why they have it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but you're going to be disappointed anyways, type of thing.
Yeah, like I feel like he like understands why it's there and kind of like at least like draws on, you know, oh, okay, well, it can, you know, it brings people comfort, but you have that like, but, you know, history, you know, by looking at history in that different light, it, like I said, allows for like that stimulus of thought.
Excellent. All right, so let's go ahead and start with A.
Wary of its repressive political implications. I don't really think that his like theory or like his opinions are focused on like repressive political implications.
Yeah, that's not what that's definitely not our attitude towards nostalgia for determinism.
Mm-hmm. So I would say no to A. B, disdainful of its sentimentality and lack of originality. I don't like B because he's not disdainful of the sentiment whatever of it being sentimental. I feel like there's not like a disdain for him. I feel like if anything, he just like more recognizes that point. He doesn't like share this like opinion against it.
Yeah.
C, I like sympathetic but mindful of its inevitable disappointment. So I'll keep that one. D, fearful of how it may prolong the influence of grand theories. I don't think that I don't sense that the author is fearful about this like idea of determinism.
Not people being nostalgic for it. I don't think he's fearing people are nostalgic for it. He's not like, oh, because of this, like we have to stop. I'm so scared that we are nostalgic for determinism. Yeah, no.
And then E, optimistic that it will help to limit the contemplation of contingency. I actually think that it's the exact opposite. Like, he uses this point of nostalgia for determinism, like, but then says, like, on the flip side, like, we should actually look at history with, like, more of this idea of, like, it being contingent. So I feel like yeah.
Yeah, I think he thinks like because we have this nostalgic, that's why we might actually lead to this other perspective.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. All right, so then when I get to 24,
Okay.
and it asks us about the organization of the passage, we want to loosely describe in our own words what we think, kind of like a reasoning question, right? How we go back and we kind of predict, like, how do we get to our conclusion or how do we get to our persuasion?
Mhm.
So what would you say in your own words is kind of how do we get to this point of persuading us that we should have this new theory? What does the author do?
Wait, we're talking about number 24, right?
Yep.
Okay. Um, uh, can you phrase that again? I don't think I
Yeah.
understand what you're
So
asking me.
like like in an LR reasoning question, we go back and we paraphrase what the author does to get to our conclusion.
Mhm.
I want you kind of to paraphrase here briefly, like what is the organization of this passage, of how the author. This one, it works really well to say it this way, but how this author gets to even their conclusion of offering this new solution.
Mhm.
So this is what I would say, just so you can kind of see one. I would say like the author kind of tells us about two theories that are
Mhm.
grand theories. It then shows us like why grand theories aren't great, and then it offers a new theory or something of that sort. Like
Mhm.
that's what I feel like is the organization of this passage. So I want
Gotcha.
to find an answer that is most similar to that.
Okay.
All right, so go ahead and start with A.
Description of a group of theories followed by a series of examples illustrating their predictive accuracy. I do not like that
No,
one.
they're not. They're not predictive accurate. Yep, excellent. All right, what about B?
Explanation of the decline and influence of a group of theories followed by a defense of their logical coherence and rigor. I don't like that one because I don't feel that the author is defending our grand theories.
Nope. Excellent.
C. Identification of the mistake common to a group of theories. Identification of the mistake common to a group of theories followed by a discussion of an alternative theoretical perspective. I'm on the fence. I don't want to cross that out.
Okay. What do you think would be the mistake common to the group of theories?
That they like that they view history like as being preceded by like certain universal laws.
Universal. Yep, that they're universal. Excellent. All right, let's go on to D.
Summary of the history of a group of theories followed by speculation regarding the future of the group. I mean, it does talk about like the history of the theories, but not really that detailed history.
I would not say it's that. I don't think in that. Yeah.
It doesn't really, and also doesn't talk about the future of the group. It talks about like the future of how we should be looking at like history.
Excellent.
And then E, identification of the essential features of a group of theories, followed by a description of some of the salient differences among these theories. That is describing as if this was like a contrasting RC.
Yes. Look at yes. So then, what is our answer?
C.
Because what and then what if we were debating between that? What is the purpose of this article to persuade us of something? And they use discussion. If we were to pick between C and D, if we go back to
Mhm.
what the goal is. Excellent.
Even though the other two said not to use that term contrast, that just to me like
Oh no, you
is
can use the word contrast. She doesn't use it because with students because she doesn't want them to think that it's only comparative passages.
like the one that says passage A and passage
Yeah,
B.
yeah.
Oh,
You're more than welcome to use that word.
okay. That just like word logically makes sense
Yeah,
to me.
no, it does.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So then 25 says the author introduces the concept of cognitive satisfaction in line 39 primarily in order to. So this is just like a rule question, right? So we
Mhm.
have to go back and ask ourselves, what is the role or the purpose of cognitive satisfaction in line 39? So then go ahead and read the sentence that this is in.
But while we no longer believe in the deterministic explanations of history offered by grand theories, we still long for cognitive satisfaction provided by a belief in historical inevitability.
So why does the author bring up cognitive satisfaction?
To kind of draw like upon this idea of maybe why like theories or why we've accepted this idea of like history being inevitable because it brings because thinking about history as being something that's like predetermined brings more of a level of like satisfaction and like comfort to a person knowing that like they don't have control over what's happening versus like the opposite idea that like you know like history like can be contingent upon like our own actions which can bring people like anxiety or something.
Yeah, like intellectual discomfort. Like,
Yeah,
so while we no longer believe in these things, like we miss what they allowed us to have.
which was just kind of like almost like blind like I say yeah kind of just like looking at history through this lens. Okay. A suggests why the wish for history to proceed with the clarity and logic of a good story is a vein of hope. Wish for history to proceed with clarity and logic. I don't think it's a vain hope.
No, we don't, and we especially don't use cognitive satisfaction to, we don't bring that up to be like, that's a vain hope.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. All right, what about B?
Explain why the demise of grand theories gave rise to nostalgia. I don't believe that. Well, did it did it say that the grand theories like that the nostalgia came from the demise of them?
So what does nostalgia mean?
Like having like looking at the past with like
Missing it, right?
yeah.
So would the demise of grand theory give rise to missing something?
Yes.
Yeah, what is it?
The satisfaction of thinking of history as being determined.
That comfort, right?
Yeah.
All right, so let's leave B for a second and see if we don't like the other ones.
C. Show that the notion of satisfaction derived from the comfort of universal laws became less popular as grand theories climbed. I don't like that one because, like, he's not introducing this concept of cognitive satisfaction and then doesn't go on to talk about like that it how it became less popular. He doesn't talk about the popularity at all.
Yeah, our comfort, like as how much we appreciate the comfort universal laws provided us doesn't decrease when the theories themselves decreased.
Mm-hmm.
Right? What about D?
Question the applicability of narrative techniques to the unrepeatable details of human events. Question. Sometimes you just read some
Oh,
of these things and they're like,
I'm like,
what
what is that even saying? I'm like, okay,
question?
question.
So question how applicable like narrative the narrative techniques to the unrepeatable. I don't really feel like he talks about like history being like unrepeatable.
Yeah, that's definitely not what cognitive satisfaction, if nothing else, it's definitely not what cognitive satisfaction is introduced to do.
Mm-hmm. And
Awesome.
then E argue that interest in universal determinants in history will decline as new narrative conventions develop. No, I don't think that that's why he's using this idea of cognitive satisfaction.
Awesome. So our answer is B. All right, let's go on to 26. So, according to the passage, which of the following best describes the reason why Freudianism is considered a grand theory? This is one where I would, if I can't predict why it is a grand theory, I would just control F it. And I remember it was in the first paragraph.
Can't you not can you not control F on the test?
No, you can control F on the test.
Hmm.
Use
My
it. Oh yeah, practice using it.
I thought I thought you couldn't do that.
Oh no, 100. I 100%. I swear that you can.
Oh. Hmm.
So I would control it because yeah. So
Well, that would be nice to
glad that there's another thing. I'm glad that there we
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Okay, so a grand theory is so Freudianism views culture, politics, and other forms of social interactions as the product of specific form psychological traits that they believe are universal. Okay. And a grand theory is an influential intellectual movement that attempted to account for a broad range of historical things with a single ambitious explanation. Okay, and so what did Freudianism believe was the explanation?
That things were occurring as a result of like products of human psychological traits,
Excellent.
of universal human psychological traits.
Perfect. All right, go ahead and try this one.
Um, it viewed human. Whoa, sorry. It viewed human psychological traits as universal rather than particular to the individual. It viewed human psychological traits as universal rather than particular. I'd like to keep that.
Okay.
B, it had adherents who treated the theory as if it were scientific fact. I don't like that one.
It had followers that treated it like, no, that's not what made it a grand theory or why it was considered a grand theory.
Yeah. C, it attempted to explain history in a way that provided narrative satisfaction. It attempted to explain history in a way that provided. No, it doesn't talk about narrative satisfaction.
Excellent. That's not why it's considered a grand theory.
D, it attempted to account for a broad range of phenomena by means of a single explanation. It attempted to account for a broad range of phenomena by means of a single explanation. I'd like to keep that one.
That's okay.
And E, it emphasized the importance of contingency, particularity, and novelty. No, not that one.
Yeah, that's like the opposite, right?
That's what our author is saying.
Yeah. So
Not
whenever
Freud.
I get down to two like this, I reread my question again just to make sure like I didn't miss a small word.
So which one of the following best describes the reason why Freudianism? D.
Excellent. Why is it not A?
Because that was a good tip. Because like it's not like, because if the question was saying like what does like the grand, like what does Freud's grand theory like base, like what is
What
like
does
the,
it do? Like what is its function?
yeah,
But
then A would be right.
it's essentially just this question is essentially just asking us what is the definition of a grand theory,
Yeah.
which is D. Excellent. This is a level 5 question. Many people pick A over D.
But that's like a good, by rereading the question again, I saw why is it considered a grand theory? Not because I think you could easily, I kind of did the same, just see Freudism and you think that maybe like your initial thought would be, oh, it's just asking what does like Freud say, or like, you know what I mean?
Yes,
What is, yeah.
exactly. And then it's nice to reread the question right before you read the two answer choices you're debating, like back to back.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then our last question is 27.
Okay. It can be inferred from the passage that the author would most likely agree with which one of the following statements. Okay. So A, since history is not fully explainable, we cannot hope for narrative satisfaction. I do not like that one.
Yeah, I think he thinks that we can get narrative satisfaction.
B, since historical contingency cannot be predicted, the study of history must avoid contingency. He says the opposite. He's saying that we should look at history like as being contingent.
Excellent.
C, there are enough features common to all people's experiences to provide the foundation for universal laws of history. There are enough features common to all people's experiences. I do not like that one.
Yeah. I don't
Because it
think
doesn't really talk about like the features of people's
do
experiences.
you think that there are like universal laws of history? Not necessarily.
Okay. The works of Marx and Freud illustrate the historical perspective that should be used for studying events in the 19th century. Illustrate this. No. Because I don't like this, like how it's just saying study events in the 19th century.
Like how we should, like this is saying like what we now, how we now should study what happened then. Where he's saying like no, like maybe during that time it was okay to view things through that lens because it was of that era, but we need to look through things like through a new like
different lens. Yeah. So then in the study of history is impaired by the imposition of universal parents. Yes, he would agree with that.
Excellent. So this was a level 5 passage, one of the hardest of all time.
Oh, I didn't think it was that hard.
No,